What's the worst thing a doctor has ever said to you? The cancer I had has a 90% mortality rate. I ended up not having that cancer. It's what my doctor didn't say. I legit found out via my chart that I had cancer. No one told me during my 3-day hospital stay for a burst appendix that my appendix also had cancer. I was just casually scrolling through my chart after my stay when I was at home that my pathology report was abnormal. So I clicked on it, and lo and behold, it was abnormal because it was full of cancer. So that was fun. It was more 50% chance I have this non-treatable tumor, mainly due to where it was located, that would give me 1 to 2 years to live. Was the longest week of my life while I went for all the tests. I told my doc to be straight up, and he did, and also told me to get my affairs in order before I got my results, as I might be thinking as straight after. Was also the best week of my life. I started to accept death a lot more, decided how and where I would do it, and live the next year or two out. Also made me see who were my real friends and gave me a whole new lease on life. Ended up being in the clear, for no have to get it tested once a year, but it forever changed me, and I feel like I had a ND from it. Never taken a day for granted since. At 30, I was rushed into hospital out of the blue with a heart infection and needing a valve replacing. The professor was absolutely brilliant, but she told me off the record that you may want to get any close family to come and visit and sort out any important paperwork, as it's not guaranteed that you'll wake up again. I obviously pulled through, but her honesty was reassuring, and even after 10 years we still send the odd handwritten letter to each other. We also had these stupid personal televisions at each bed, which cost about £2 an hour to watch. Ye money would seriously rack up as I was in there for weeks, but she blagged me a pirated code so that I could watch it for free lol. It was to my husband. I was in the room. I'm not going to figure out what it is. If it was serious, you'd be dead by now. Later, we found out that this doctor was the one that my husband's uncle was seeing before he was diagnosed with colon cancer. By the time another doctor found it, it was too late. He said there was no way it should have been missed. I'm so sorry, that's awful. Similarly, my mother had spent the autumn of 2010 getting her cough and symptoms checked out. The family doc had an x-ray of her chest done, looked it in, and told her she must have pneumonia, and gave her antibiotics. A few months later, she's in the hospital, and they let her know she's got stage 4 metastatic cancer. Literally tumors everywhere from head to toe. She passed away about a month later. I was 18-19 and my first Geno apt. I told her how something hurt when I had and I wanted to start birth control, and she told me that I was too young to have, so she wasn't going to help with that. I had an abnormal pap and discovered I had contracted HPV, which I have a hunch occurred from some guy who took the condom off mid-act without saying anything. I didn't know what it was and kinda panicked. After the colposcopy, doctor recommended cryosurgery, where they basically shot a bunch of liquid nitrogen into my cervix. It was one of the most painful medical procedures I've had done. It hurt for a full 24 hours after. I could barely drive home. They told me I could return to my job where I am on my feet all day with kids, but there was no way. The kicker, at the time I was still thinking I wanted kids. So through the tears and pain of all the cramping, I asked my Geno if I could still have kids, and he told me to focus on getting through grad school first, and then didn't answer my question. Never went back. When I first started going to Geno appointments, my mom had me go to the doctor she'd seen for years. Had nothing but good things to say about her. So I went to my first appointment when I was 18, and she asked me how many partners I'd had, and at the time it was 7. I guess some would consider that high for being right out of high school, but her reaction floored me. I will never forget the look of disbelief on her face, like I'd committed a crime or something. She paused and asked, "What are you doing?" and then lectured me for like 10 minutes. I just wanted to smack her. Obviously, I never went back to her and found a new doctor. I've had a couple other gynas since then, and none of them ever asked me about my total number of partners, and no other negative experiences at all. I would constantly complain to my doctor that I couldn't breathe when I would walk, and I would get shortness of breath. I was always tired and fatigued. I would get dizzy if I walked too long. She always brushed it off and told me to get more sleep or drink more water, even though I was getting plenty of both. Finally, I made an appointment to talk to her face to face, and she flat out just told me I was lazy and needed to exercise more. I was so embarrassed because I went with my husband and she made me feel like I was just this lazy couch potato. I switched doctors and my new doc decided to do blood work, which is something that other lady should have done in the first place, and found out I was severely anemic to the point of needing blood transfusions. I felt so much better after I got my infusions. Some people just shouldn't be practicing medicine. I have a doozy for you all if I'm not too late. My sister called me in tears, saying she couldn't even stand up, she was in so much pain. I absolutely boosted to her house, find her vomiting in so much pain she can hardly move. Got her in the car, got to the hospital. They moved her into ED pretty damn quick as she was screaming in pain. My champion of a sister managed to answer their questions whilst dealing with the worst pain of her life. She did her best to comply with their exams, etc. Eventually a doctor comes in and says they suspect she has an STD that is causing the pain. Except there's no STDs showing up on their panels. He tells us it's his best guess, tells us we can be on our way, and leaves the room. Cue my sister vomiting in excruciating pain every time she moved. We pressed the call bell and they asked what was up. I said there is absolutely no way we could leave the hospital with her in this condition. The nurse just scoffed at us, then left. We were left in ED with my sister vomiting in pain, telling me she was going to die. Every call button press resulted in literally no one coming to see us. If they did, we got told there are bigger emergencies than you right now. She had at least 7 buckets of sick sitting on the shelf from how much pain she was in, and no one saw us for about 2-3 hours, not even exaggerating. She was eventually transferred because we became too annoying, I guess, to an observation unit overnight. I had to go home cause they wouldn't let me stay. The next day I got there, my sister was a shell of herself. She was literally gray and said the pain was still there. She just didn't have the energy to fight it anymore. I told her since she was in hospital, at least she was safe, but she told me she legitimately thought she was going to die. A day later, she calls me. They finally did an ultrasound after 3 days. Apparently NZ hospitals have no ultrasound technicians on for holiday periods, and told me her ovary was twisted around a ridiculous amount of times. She said they have to operate right now. She's lucky to be alive. The hospital wouldn't allow us to have any documentation about her operation or anything. They told us it was not her information to have. The fact that doctor wrote her off as having an STD and never looked into anything else until the last moment when she was going septic sickens the out of me. And the fact ovarian torsion is a medical emergency whilst we were being told there were bigger things to worry about. I'm just glad she's still in here. That I obviously didn't dislocate my knee. I had put it back in myself before I went to her because it wasn't swollen out like a balloon. He then proceeded to push my knee down flat after it had seized in a bent position to put a stretchy bandage on it. I went back 2 days later because I had lost feeling in my toes as the knee had pinched nerves. They did MRI and I had a complete tear of the ankle, and my bones in the shin bone and femur were bright white from the bone bruises, fractures. I absolutely dislocated me knee and the DR just smashed my knee down and set off Yago basically. 3 years ago I went for an eye test. The optician gave me a note and told me to go directly to an eye hospital. I gave the note to reception at the eye hospital. The lady said, "Oh, right, come this way." I was taken right through the waiting room and put in a CT scanner within 20 minutes of arrival. Shortly after, a DR came and said that there is something in the middle of your brain and that an ambulance is going to take me to a neurosurgery specialist hospital. A few hours later I was having a drain put into my skull to get rid of built-up spinal fluid pooling behind my eyes. An MRI scan revealed a golf ball-sized cyst in the middle of my head that was causing problems. That was a pretty bad day. Went to a female primary care doctor when I was like 13 and she said she needed to ask me personal questions that I might not be comfortable answering in front of my mom, and she wanted honesty, and so my mom very begrudgingly left. She told me I looked anemic and asked me if I was on my period. I told her no. She said that she usually sees these signs in younger girls because they are having some bleeding issues with their periods. She asked me if I was a virgin. I asked why, and she said it's because she wanted to know whether or not my hymen was broken so she would know in advance of the pap smear she was about to give me. I'm 13. I don't even fully know what a pap smear was. It was not broken yet. She broke it. She had me in stirrups with tools holding me open and it hurts, and she just went in with her fingers with no lubrication. It finished. She said she'd call my mom with the results. We left. I didn't tell my mom because I figured she knew, and I was just embarrassed from the whole thing. Stopped me from going to a gyno for a long time. My mom brought up the doctor when I was like in my 20s, and I was like, yeah, I didn't like her. She was not careful with that pap smear, and my mom looks at me and says, "What pap smear? I was never told of this. She gave you a pap smear without consent from me?" Turns out that's not okay. Went to a gyno a little over a year ago and had a proper pap smear, and it was not like what I had experienced before. There really wasn't any pain. I wasn't put in stirrups. She was super duper gentle. I was surprised to learn lubrication would be used. There was no blood, etc. Yeah, that wasn't great to realize. This was overheard by a friend of mine when a neurosurgeon looked at the CT of her son's brain. There's no point in doing this one. This kid is done. I'm out of here. The good news is another neurosurgeon did the surgery and the kid, now about 40, is perfectly fine today. Another story I heard while working in a hospital, but cannot verify, a guy was gravely injured due to being shot in the face. There was no chance of recovery and he was expected to die within a very short period of time. An intern walks in the room and says, "Is this the guy we are going to harvest the kidneys from?" The doomed patient was reported to have reacted by briefly bolting up into a sitting position. I hope it is not true, but they did get the kidneys. In middle school, I was seeing a psychiatrist for generalized anxiety and panic disorder. I had been struggling with my weight because I was too anxious to eat, and at one point I was about 15 pounds underweight. I started taking antidepressants, and I gained weight once my anxiety started improving. One day, my psychiatrist brought me over to a scale so he could weigh me. He told me that I needed to watch what I was eating because I was starting to get fat. I was finally at the low end of a healthy weight after struggling for months, and it was such a blow to my self-esteem after all the progress I had made. I broke out in tears as soon as he said that. It crushed me. My mom yelled at him, and we walked out of his office and never came back. Said I might have cancer and then walked out the door. For 20 minutes I sat there contemplating, do I really have cancer and what will my life be now? Nurse came in and was like, "Yay, it's not cancer, just a blood clot." I find this one very hard. It will absolutely be terrifying sitting there, thinking you might have cancer and what to do. But then again, being kept in the dark has some people worrying about it a lot too. My dad, for example, is always complaining they don't tell him what they're suspecting, but instead he feels like they keep leading him on. Glad it wasn't cancer in the end anyway. I was newly clean and had to have most of my teeth pulled. The dental surgeon poked around at my healed-over track marks, then brought all his staff in to look at them. Then he began accusing me of taking cocaine and Xanax the night before and threatening he would put me out because that. I literally did not understand what was happening. It was humiliating on a level I cannot explain. I was already humiliated and embarrassed at the shape of my mouth. Now this? All I could do was politely sit there and take it, wait for him to finish with all his little hate, and do his job. If the headaches and tinnitus are still present in a month, come back and see me again because it's probably a brain tumor. And with those few words, my then DR triggered a years-long battle with health anxiety. It wasn't a brain tumor, just a sinus infection. My 4-year-old developed a tremor in one arm overnight. We were sent straight from my GP to the emergency department where I was told it was probably a rare symptom of a historic virus and refused further tests. I called our GP with my concerns and she, wonderful saint that she is, went out of her way to make a nuisance of herself and arranged an MRI through oncology directly. It was a brain tumor and a big one. Our GP saved her life. I still can't understand why the neurologist was happy to send a 4-year-old home with the classic symptom for a brain tumor in her cerebellum. I once told the wrong family member that her mother was coding. I have some decent excuses, but that was horrible. It was late enough at night that I was the only doc on, with just a handful of nursing and tech staff. As we go into those quieter hours, one by one the other doctors sign out their patients to the overnight staff and leave. I got called into a room to run a code someone found down and already worked on for 20 minutes en route by EMS. It wasn't looking very hopeful for a meningeal recovery. A woman in her 40s appears in the doorway and says she's the daughter If I'm the only doc on, I have to do the intubation, run the code, and speak with the family. Sometimes it's all at the same time. Since she turned up and appeared to recognize the patient, I failed to confirm the patient's name with the daughter, and instead launched into the delicate questions. How long had she been ill? How did this start? Turns out, the daughter was actually the daughter of the previous patient in that room, who had been moved out to accommodate the arrival of the coding patient. When she came in, she told the front desk that she didn't need any help finding her mom's room, so she brought herself back. Very unusual, but the code was monopolizing the staff. Her mom had the same hair color, and there's all kinds of tubes obscuring the face during these times. Her actual mom was just fine. 2 doors down. Well, the daughter didn't have a heart attack, so that was nice. And never will I ever again gloss over confirmation of identity, no matter how obvious it seems. A doctor told my parents I'd gotten used to all the attention after having an emergency appendectomy and was only pretending to still be in excruciating pain. I was 7-ish. What actually happened was they'd left acid just around and it was literally burning tissue and creeping over to my liver. I spent a month in the hospital. A different doctor, who used to be a family friend, once told my sister 6 years old that Tourette's syndrome wasn't real and she needed to stop faking it. I can't tell you how damaging that was and what it took to help her feel secure with her tics again. After a horrific car accident, I was in unbearable pain. My doctor puts up my x-rays, looks down at me, and in the most condescending way said, "I hope you have a good attorney. You may never be the same again." I went from being in the best shape of my life to losing more than 50 pounds after the accident. I looked like a prisoner of war. After months of painful physical therapy at a place I referred to as Land of the Misfit Toys, I eventually made it back. I went to the DR for headaches and stress. I run my own business. He sent off for some tests and in cause of the headaches. I never have had headaches before. Told me to take a vacation and relax, that I was probably just overworking myself and stressed from my business. So took the whole family, wife, kids, dog, on a nice getaway to the Smoky Mountains and rented us a nice private cabin and had 5 whole days to relax and take in the beauty of the Smokies. Got to our cabin around PM. It was amazing. Indoor pool, billiards table, indoor putt-putt golf, and an arcade room, all you ourselves. I know it sounds extravagant and expensive, but we actually paid like $1,000 for the whole week. I thought it was a great deal for everything that was included. Woke up the next morning excited to check out Pigeon Forge, and the kids wanted to go kart and all that. Well, 8:30 a.m., I check my email against my wife's advice and I see an email from my doctor with the results of my MRI. It read like this: Mr. XX, the results of your MRI have been reviewed by our medical team and we have found a large brain tumor on all of the scans. Please contact us immediately to schedule more testing and to speak with a neurosurgeon. Try relaxing on vacation. After reading that, Tleater went on vacation, found out I had a brain tumor. I went through treatment for acute myeloid leukemia 6 years ago. I went through chemotherapy and total body irradiation with an allogenic stem cell transplant. My 28-day biopsy after my stem cell transplant results came in, and my doctor literally came in stoic as could be with paperwork printed out. He just said the transplant didn't work and I still had residual cancer cells in my flow cytometry of my marrow. I simply just accepted it and didn't even look at the paper. My brain was just thinking of all the different scenarios. As the minutes went by, I had a different attending come in and say that there was still other options, which made me reassured. I also had another doctor from the Middle East come in after her and told me I was still young and there's other treatments we can try, so it lessened the blow at that point. I had always been pretty optimistic, even with such a poor prognosis. Fast forward another 14 days, I had another bone marrow biopsy to see how much the cancer had progressed, to see how we could attack it, and there were no signs of any cancer cells. Ever since that day, I have been cancer-free. My donor cells attacked the residual cancer cells and saved me. I now have the DNA of a French woman that is 6 years old. Modern medicine can be amazing. That I had bipolar disorder. I was medicated for it. It didn't work, so he kept increasing the dose. Eventually, I was taking 800 milligrams of Seroquel a day. I was so doped up I couldn't read. Dropped out of college. I couldn't sleep without it anymore, and when I tried, I stood up for almost a week. Had to move back with my father because I wasn't able to care for myself anymore. Tried to myself a couple times. Ended up under observation. Doctor considered shock therapy. After almost 10 years lost, I had switched doctors, found a good therapist, and started the process to remove the meds. Turns out I'm not bipolar, I'm autistic. I don't have mania, I have sensorial overload and hyperfocus. I act weird when put in chaotic situations because they overwhelm me. After 2 years of therapy, neurologist and psychiatrist appointments, and hundreds of pages of diaries and reports written, I finally got a proper diagnosis and I'm free from that. I'm not getting those 10 years back though. My mom died during that time, and I'm not getting her back either. I'm in college again, but the opportunities I lost are gone forever. And the doctor? He's still out there, getting paid by the Ing Drug Company to push their product. Him. I was told very recently that I need open heart surgery to repair my aorta and heart valves. I will probably have to spend a week in the hospital and another couple of weeks in a cardiac recovery center. I will have to have this surgery sometime next month as soon as all tests are complete. My mom was diagnosed with congestive heart failure back in 1999 and had open heart surgery to repair a leaky heart valve. It restored a good chunk of her heart function and put a pause on the heart failure for 15 years until she ended up needing and getting a heart transplant. Hang in there. I know surgeries are scary, especially one as major as open heart surgery, but it can work miracles. I had a hard lump under my belly button that was excruciatingly painful. I had a hernia there when I was 7, so went to my GP to get some advice, scans about how to deal with it since it was now very painful. The doctor felt around and was like, "Oh yeah, there is a lump," while I was crying in agony. She then told me not to worry about it because it was only small and pregnant women get hernias much worse than this. It was a few years of debilitating pain later. I finally found a new doctor who sent me for scans right away and put me on a waiting list for a repair. When they finally took it out, it was actually an endometrioma. At every step of the way, doctors shrugged off how painful it actually was, thinking it was just a hernia. It was the bloss attitude that always got me, even from their doctors. I was in my last year of middle school or maybe early high school, and I had developed early for a young teenage girl. Went to my pediatrician with my stepmom because I still saw him as a teenager. I have a faint memory of my doctor saying something about comparing my boobs to Britney Spears or Jessica Simpson. Don't remember why one of them was named at all. I am not blonde, and just straight up complimenting them, and I remember being like, "Oh, that's really weird." Note that I never took my shirt off for the appointment, and I doubt I was wearing anything crazy. I was a big t-shirt and Nike shorts child. But my stepmom didn't say anything, she just laughed, and when I went home I told my mom. She absolutely blew up, as she should. But her blame was more on my dad, as he was supposed to take me to my appointment, not my stepmom. And the doctor would have never said anything about it if my dad were there. Needless to say, I did not see the doctor again. I don't know if my mom reported him, but I wish she had. I look back and I cringe at that entire situation, and I wonder how many other patients he grossly walleyed.